Bill Jasper with the New American Magazine and Liberty News Network. We're in Salt Lake City at the Grand American Hotel for the National Governors Association annual meeting. With me here is Governor Matt Mead, Governor of Wyoming. Governor, thank you for being with us today. Now, you were elected in 2010, correct?
I was elected in 2010, and I just came in January, so we're about on 7 months now.
7 months into the... And what do you think of the...
You know, it's an interesting thing. I am somebody that got into the race because I like to see things getting done. As you know, I came from a ranching background, and the ranching background is a great background, I think, for politics because you have to ultimately be very fiscally conservative. I mean, if you don't have enough grass, you don't have enough grass. You got to do something about it. And so part of my frustration as governor is as we see things, particularly on the national level, you're growing more and more frustrated that things aren't getting done in the way you'd like to see them get it done. But it's great being governor, and it's great being governor of Wyoming because we are a fiscally conservative state. We try to limit the amount of government involvement in people's lives, and I think that's a great thing. And hopefully that is also a great message for the rest of the country, particularly for Congress, as they're looking for what the future ought to be.
Well, that leads me to the economic situation. Wyoming is one of the stands in better stead than most of the other states there, or many of the other states anyway.
We do indeed. You know, we are fiscally conservative by law and by nature, and we run a balanced budget. We are ahead of forecast right now. We have 560,000 people, and you know the state debt burden on our citizens is about $70 a person, which is much less than the federal damage that's been done. And so we also are, about $14 to $15 billion in savings. We're about $300 million ahead of revenue forecast for the year. And I would also point out we are one of the lowest tax states. We have no personal income tax, we have no corporate tax, and yet we're running these great budget surplus. And because we believe that is a great message to business to have low taxes.
You also have one of the lower unemployment rates.
We do. And it's gotten better. Last year, about this time, we were about 7.2%. We're now about 6%, and which is good compared to the national average. But of course, if you're one of those 6%, it feels like 100%. So we certainly want to continue to work on that. And I think one of the ways we can do that is advertise Wyoming as a fiscally conservative state, a state that wants to attract business, and a very good place to do business, not just for the economics, but for the quality of life that we can provide in Wyoming.
Now, Wyoming is one of the 26 states that are party with Florida in its lawsuit against the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare. You're a former U.S. attorney. What do you see as the lawsuit's chances of accomplishing what it's set out to do?
I think they're very good. As you read through Judge Vinson's opinion out of Florida, and that's the one we joined, he did a very good job, I think, outlining what the federal role is and the state role is, what the 10th Amendment means, and I think that is my belief as well, as he outlaid in his decision. So I think the chances are good, and we entered that lawsuit, number one, because we think the policy is bad for Wyoming. We don't believe in a cookie-cutter approach driven down from Washington. And number two, we entered into it because I firmly believe it's unconstitutional. And so my hope rides with my belief. I believe it's unconstitutional, and therefore I'm very hopeful that ultimately when it reaches the Supreme Court, they too will find it unconstitutional.
Now, that brings up another matter. You mentioned the 10th Amendment, and we have written about and have supported, and many others around the country are supporting the principle of nullification. That is, the states are not solely dependent upon what federal courts say about the federal reach of the government, but that the Constitution gives the states certain sovereign rights or reserves to them sovereign rights. What about if the lawsuit fails? Do you support any kind of nullification effort by the states to stop something that is unconstitutional, such as Obamacare?
Well, the only concern I have about that is when you start talking about nullification in each individual state, because there are some things, and most important to me is the men and women in our military. And if we had something that here's what the military wants to do, and individual states said, you know what, we're not going to agree to send our men and women, even though they've been called out. I worry about the nullification process as a whole, how that would affect the country. If we get to the point where the U.S. Supreme Court says, in fact, that the law is constitutional, which, as I said, I don't think they're going to, I think that the better remedy is to vote those who supported what I view as an unconstitutional law out of office. Difficult to do, I understand, and not a great solution, especially for states like Wyoming that feel it's unconstitutional. But I think that's where it would leave Wyoming.
Do you see any other more robust attempts to apply something such as nullification, or more robust use of states' rights in terms of things, for instance, the Endangered Species Act? Wyoming is fighting the wolves issue as well as other things where a federally imposed endangered species effort is undermining the rights of state citizens in Wyoming.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one of the topics we've discussed this week because you have, the governors here, and it seems to me as you talk to governors, regardless of party, that they should say, listen, we want more control in the hands of our states than we do in the federal level. But there's not a consensus amongst the governors about that. I think most of my fellow Republican governors very strongly believe that states are not only the laboratory of democracy, but we're the ones that have to make the tough decisions because we do have to balance our budget. And anything we can do individually, or more importantly, collectively as states, whether it's a Republican state or a Democrat state, to say to Congress, listen, we can do a better job, we can help the country, and frankly, the decisions that have continued to erode states' rights, have continued to build interstate commerce rights, are not good for the country, they're not good for the individual states, and we need to start turning back that tide. And as we are all impatient year by year to see some progress on that, we can't give up the fight for more and more state control, because we can do it better, and that's what I want to see.
Along those same lines, Wyoming has been ravaged by the pine beetle, the mountain pine beetle. I think 3.5 million acres or something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe most of that, or a lot of that, is on national forest land. Again, that gets to the federal government's management or mismanagement of assets that are in Wyoming, and that is throughout most of the western states where the federal footprint is so large.
Yeah, it's an odd thing as we continue to struggle with the Endangered Species Act, and they say you got to do this for protection of and conservation. At the same time, we've got these forests out here that, as you say, have been totally ravaged by the pine beetle. Much of it, the vast majority of it, is on federal land, and we have timber in there that is rotting away that could have a good use, that ultimately adds more CO2 and the greenhouse gases into the air than if you took it and actually used it. And we can't get into those forests.
As well as forest fire hazards.
Forest fire hazards, and it's ultimately very bad for the environment. I mean, if you want to burn up the huge amount of acreage that's on a beetle kill, it's going to affect the land, and it's going to ultimately affect the water and the air. And so, what is the message from the federal government? If they want conservation, why aren't we doing a better job managing those forests? The best managed forest in Wyoming is one where they have a very robust timber industry. That is the healthiest forest that we have in Wyoming, which is a good example why we need multiple use. And so it's frustrating as we look at sort of those inconsistent messages. And even though most of the beetle kill is in fact on federal ground, they're neighbors. And then the neighbor next door is private ground, or the neighbor next door is state ground. And we are getting the damage from their beetle kill onto our state and our private ground. And so people are very frustrated about that. It's a waste of a very good resource.
Do you find that the Western Governors Association is much more in tune with this because they're closer to it, and some of at the national level, some of those who don't understand the large swath that the federal government owns in the western states don't really get the picture?
I think that is true on the issue of the beetle kill, and I think it's true with with a lot of other issues. You know, the West and some of the issues facing the Western states seem completely foreign to the Eastern states. And understandably, I don't know Eastern states' issues as much, but the problem is so much of our population lives in states where they don't have these large percentages of federal ground, and they don't understand the frustrations when we talk about them, whether it is beetle kill, whether it's wolves, whether it's endangered species. It seems foreign to them. And so the challenge for Western governors, the challenge for Republican governors, is to continue to make our voice heard in Washington and beyond, to say, you know, this matters for our individual states, and because our individual states are such great contributors to the country, it should also matter to the country.
Thank you so much, Governor. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule.
No, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.